Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Need Some Introduction. In this podcast, we introduce you all to something new to watch, usually TV show, sometimes movies, sometimes other things as well, but usually a show that we're watching week to week along with you. And in this particular case, we continue to watch Your Friends and Neighbors, the John Hamm series on Apple TV Plus. And in today's episode, Sona and I will be discussing the fifth episode in this season, this first season of the show. Definitely coming back for a second season for all of you who don't know. Currently shooting the second season. This episode is called The Tourist. This Tourist Has Balls. I don't think I mentioned, by the way, Sona, that last week's episode was called Literal Dragons.
You did mention, I think. Yeah. And I guess, sometimes we try and read into the titles of the episodes. Here, it seems like they just have kind of a catchy pull quote from each episode as the title.
Yeah, I mean, when he's talking about how Ali's making fun of the fact that he likes to watch Kung Fu movies, for example, and he goes, there's no literal dragons in those movies.
Right.
And, but literal dragons, are there literal dragons in his world? Apparently not. Lots of figurative ones, perhaps.
I think a lot of figurative ones.
So we could probably start at the end of the episode before we do a full episode breakdown. And I want to get your feel for how you're feeling about the show and the direction it's gone in. But I do want to start at the end because I had speculated last week that given the time frame we're in,
yes,
we have to be closing in on that moment where we start the series. And then I'm like, wow, we're going to go through a whole entire episode. And I guess I was wrong because, here we are at the very end and we haven't gotten back to that body at the bottom of the stairs. And yes, indeed, in just in the final moments, we did circle back to.
I give you credit. You were spot on with that calculation of the timeline and wondering why we haven't seen it. It all came together. And I thought, Victor told me so.
I'm always right. Well, no, just kidding. I'm not always right. But I did find that interesting because of the fact that it's like the show was telling us over the course of the episode. Because she says, you've only been doing this for a few weeks. And then I literally stopped at that moment. Like, okay, so she's specifically saying he's been doing this for 3 weeks. So we are closing in because it said a month. And then, of course, we did circle all the way back to that 1 month time frame. This has been a very eventful month for this guy.
Yeah, he must be exhausted.
Oh, we also have more clarity on a couple of things that I missed calculated last week. We have a little more clarity on how long this divorce is. I think we had speculated it was maybe a couple of years. Turns out it's just the anniversary of the divorce. So it's only been about a year. And also the birthday party. It was her 40th birthday party, which was explicitly said in last week's episode, which I had missed. But of course, my wife is always delayed watching. So I did watch part of this episode with her a few days later. And yes, it's her 40th birthday. So
I totally missed that.
So she is younger than he is, but also it seems odd that she was talking to that bartender and he
I'm not sure that tracks.
Yeah.
But okay.
Yeah. I agree. But I mean, he said he's 46 in the show, so she could be 6 years younger, but they met in college. Is that possible? Maybe. I don't know. I mean, it's definitely possible. not maybe not that likely.
No, it's not that, but I'm not sure it's consistent with other things as well in the show, but hardly seems like something to get hung up on, except, it's a good explanation for why this party was so over the top. But, we could also have an explanation of these people are just fabulously wealthy and don't know what to do with their money. So they do stuff like this.
Amanda Peet also is over 50 years old and looks incredible, by the way, but she's over 50 years old. So she's playing 40. Maybe, I don't know if that's all working out.
Bit of a stretch. Yeah.
And it also seems that she's having more of a midlife crisis you can have a midlife crisis at 40, but seems unlikely.
At least in 2025. In the 1970s, I think that would be a very typical age for a midlife crisis.
Oh, I think I've said this on the podcast before, but I find it so funny when I watch old movies and there's like the spinster, the woman who's like approaching death practically in the plot of the movie. And then I look at the age of the actress and I'm like, she's 41 in this movie. I'm like, wow, people got old really fast back in the old days.
And not even the old days, if you've seen, and I don't have it in front of me, so I don't have the details, but there's a meme of like how old the Golden Girls
Yes.
actresses were, and
Yes.
even I think how old their characters were. And all of it does not make any sense in 2025.
Yes. Or Cocoon. The actors in
Right.
Cocoon were like late 40s, early 50s, and they're like headed for the retirement home. I'm like, really? That's I think of nowadays, if you're in your 50s, you're still working a full-time job and raising a family. I don't know.
Yep.
I don't know. I guess things just happened much sooner back in the old days. And not that old, right? Like we're talking 40 years ago. Much less like the 1950s, where you are apparently when you're if you're 19 and you haven't married yet, you are a spinster, and if you are 40 and you're not married, you might as well just go bury yourself in the
Just
backyard.
die. Yeah.
Exactly. So how did you like this episode? Let's start with that.
I really enjoyed the episode. I felt like it was a little bit different than the prior ones. Well, we already talked about there kind of being a shift in what the show is about in the previous episode, but here, I think we got a new setting, a lot of time spent in a new setting
Yeah.
outside of their New York City wealthy suburbs. So I kind of liked the shift in the setting. I like the introduction of the new character. I don't know if we'll see him again.
Mhm.
I like the plot of the art heist, even though stolen art is, as Lou points out, an infamously tricky market
Yeah.
because you buy this unique, super valuable black market thing and you can't really tell anybody that you have it,
Right.
So it's a weird stolen item to do a trade in. But I mean, there is a market for it, as they point out. It's a tricky one. I mean, someone looking to make fast money, I think this is a weird way to turn, but it was interesting.
Yeah, I found that I would like to see a deeper exploration of this because I do find it fascinating. On the one hand, it makes sense that he wants to have like a big get. And you can imagine that a Lichtenstein that's probably worth, they say the last time they sold it was a million and change. And the art market has just gotten so hot so that this thing could be worth $5 or $6 million. So even on the black market, it could be worth multiple millions of dollars, so that it could be a huge get for them. But like you mentioned, it's the value of those things traditionally is that you can donate them to a museum and use it as a tax write-off, and eventually it's an asset that doubles in value. And of course, the asset side of it could be valuable because you can sell it to someone else on the black market. There are these private collectors who deal in stolen art all the time, but it is a much more limited pie than going on a public auction and selling for many, many millions of dollars. So he is limiting his approach there. But then again, the art is a one of a kind thing. So there are certain buyers that will pay for that experience of having something that they couldn't have, right? It's like there's something about the illicitness of it that is the appeal. So it's interesting, but I'd like to know more about it. And I do worry, although I did like this episode in general, by the way, I liked that it did kind of not go so much plot like we talked about last week, that I had some issues with how it was going in a different direction and introducing a bunch of characters, and kind of you could feel it. You could feel the story setting up dominoes. This was more of it did seem to be luxuriating a little bit more in this new tableau. They were setting up these new set of characters, and I am very curious to know if the art thing is going to pay off. Because I was thinking, just logistically, as things played out, he may have burned this bridge with this art dealer, and also the art dealer now has the thing. Like, what's he going to
Mhm.
get? And I worry that that was all for naught, basically, right? Because is
I
he going
mean,
to
I
go?
think at the end of the episode, he's basically accepting that
Yeah.
it's most likely all for naught.
So what a waste that he literally stole this
Uh-huh.
the biggest thing he's ever stolen, and but it does speak to the fact this kind of nihilistic and almost place he is in his to speak to how it does develop the character somewhat. He is really in this he's cornering himself to a large extent, and I think we see that at the very end of the episode where he contemplates just letting himself drown at the bottom of the pool. And that's more than a metaphor there, obviously, in a show that's full of metaphors, and he keeps pointing out the metaphors as they come up. But that's yet another one where he almost allows himself to drown because he is, I think, probably depressed clinically at this point. And the fact that he's just like, yeah, I could throw away my whole entire life and my family's reputation if I get caught here. Oh, well, it's just $1 million, $1 million that I desperately need, by the way. Like all of that seems to be, a little nihilistic on his part. But I don't see that as a bug. I think you see that's part of his character development, to be honest.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting too. Something that we've talked about before in one of his inner monologues, he says, I was starting to enjoy doing
Yes.
all this,
Yeah.
So, as we said, most self aware finance guy
Yes.
in New York City and its suburbs.
So let's just break down the episode a little bit. A few big things happen. Of course, the biggest of all is they pull off this heist. They get introduced to this new character. This actor, by the way, we just saw him play Drummond on
Oh my
Severance,
gosh,
of
I
course.
didn't realize. Thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, so of course, Apple TV Plus, just like HBO, actually always like recycles characters. You see people just pop up like, oh, she used to be on True Blood, and now she's on this show, or or The Wire. Like all the people from The Wire always show up on other HBO shows, and so there's almost like they have like a house band that they always turn to, and maybe Apple TV is starting to do that. People have described Apple as the new HBO with some of the projects they're bringing to fore. So maybe this is another example of how they're doing that, reusing the same characters across multiple series. But and I do wonder if this character Christian is going to come back in the future. But it just seems this whole thing seems to be so badly planned that they now have handed this painting over. And what are they going to do? Go knock on the door and say, "Hey, you got my painting, the one I stole that apparently we've replaced with a fake." So no one's supposed to know that it's missing. So all of this is just, I don't know how he's going to get himself out of this, and maybe we just don't see this character again, which is unfortunate because I would be curious to see that as another element of what's going on here.
Yeah.
I'm still a little confused as to where the whole direction of the show is going to be. It seems that the break-ins are raising the attention or getting the attention of the local police. There was in the basically the one sheet for this series the idea that these secrets are going to come to light and light, I should say, and that in multiple episodes we've seen that like this. Oh,
yes,
he's discovered something, and that hasn't paid off yet either. So I am curious about but the show still is a little lumpy for me, but I like all the elements. I just want it to coalesce a little bit better. And what do you think about Elena in this situation? Elena getting hot. I mean, she was already attractive, but she's getting hotter and hotter. And like, you really start feeling like they have definitely set her up as a, possible sexual partner for him. She tries to seduce him overtly at one point in the show. So that's confusing too, because, he's reconnecting with his wife. He, it breaks up maybe, or at least temporarily, with Sam in this particular episode. And now he's got Elena as another possible sexual partner here. So it's a little confusing.
Yeah, I agree that they're setting that up. I also think there's kind of been a theme. And again, I always say, I think I'm giving Coop's character more of a wide berth than you do. I think they try and set up that he's a guy that is always trying to do the right thing.
Right.
So when she is coming on to him, he distances himself and goes to get a drink.
Right.
When he's first offered the cocaine, he says no. Right. Mm-hmm. I think he always is trying to do the right thing, but then, despite himself, he ends up doing the wrong thing. So I wonder what that means for Elena.
It is interesting, though, that he has this real moral, like he's, adamantly just like, nope, I've never cheated. And like you said, there are the times when he's like, well, I don't want to be doing drugs now. I want to like set a good example for my kids or whatever and all that. And I'm like, you are robbing people's homes to maintain the appearance of success, right? Which of course is a huge theme in this show, is maintaining the appearance of success, even if it's a false front, right?
Yeah. And I think there's a morality to it that these people aren't going to miss these things. Did they ever really deserve them anyway? Right. Who is it really hurting?
Yeah, of course, that's the big question mark that the show raises. There is a very interesting conversation he has with Elena at one point where she is saying the things you complain about, like I can't afford this.
Mm-hmm.
People would kill to have the
It's
problems
so
that you have,
true.
literally. And of course, he again trying to be the moral compass here, trying to be like, I'm looking out for you. He does make a good point to her too of saying like I can probably lawyer up, I can probably protect myself,
Mm-hmm.
I could probably get away with this, I could probably blame someone else and people would believe it, right? You're probably going to you'd probably have no recourse if you got caught doing this. To which she answers like, I don't have anything, so I'm not really worried about losing it. Although I don't know if she's right about that because she does have a family and she
Right.
does have she does you think that you are able to make ends meet, and when you're at the bottom of the barrel, losing that is really feel like she says to him, you really feel it when you really lose everything, right? And
Mm-hmm.
but I think that that is interesting where her mentality is, and I think that is something that maybe is being said there as well, that there are many people who don't think like I need to be able to pay my bills. There are many people who feel like if they are not getting more and more and more, that they are losing, they're falling behind by not having more. And she's basically saying that I would rather have a chance at more than to stay where I am now, even though she's probably just living like her cousin and her brother, etc., just living a lower middle class family, a lifestyle, which is probably what the vast majority of her peers are doing. But that is not good enough for her. And by the way, it's not good enough for anybody on this show. And that's why they're all the problems they have.
By the way, I think they're onto something with this replica idea. Why doesn't he just, when he steals a watch or a
Yes.
necklace,
Mm-hmm.
why
Yeah.
doesn't he just leave a replica? These people probably wouldn't know the difference.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, some people may be like, I'm really into this particular bag or I'm really into this particular watch. But I remember a friend of mine used to get me every year, would get me a replica watch that he would buy on Canal Street back in the old days when
Hmm.
you could just get expensive the knockoff watches. And these watches were incredible, by the way. They had been made incredibly cheaply, like every part. It wasn't just like a cheap watch with a face that said, it's a Rolex or whatever. They had remade the Rolex watch, every piece of it, and as a knockoff, and then sold them for like $50 on Canal Street. So to your point, you could probably get a nice knockoff watch that is overtly a knockoff that you buy for a couple of $100 on Canal Street or something, and then replace the
Yeah.
$200,000 watch with the $500 watch. And like you said, unless you're a watch guy and you're really looking at it, you're probably not even going to know the difference. So
The replicas are so good these days that I'm pretty sure I read for Cartier, they have this certain bracelet, the love bracelet. I might be mixing up the exact item this is about, but it's definitely a true thing. And I think it's the Cartier love bracelet. They refuse to authenticate them after the fact because the replicas are so
they
good
can't
that
tell.
even they are not sure of the difference.
Well, there you go. Right. So, and of course, there is the propriety of the actual paperwork, which would, of course, give away immediately, because there's like a number and there's like it's lasered on there, so everything has to match. So that is, of course, if you take the paperwork wherever you are, wherever it is, if you even remember where it is, and you pull out the watch out of your drawer, you could correlate the things that, oh, this is obviously a fake. But once again,
Right.
if you're just seeing it every once in a while when you slide out your drawer and even wearing it
Exactly.
occasionally for a day and then putting it back in there, you're not going to know. So I think that's a great point. And by the way, we are in the heart of, he's in the city every single day where, you can pick up those knockoffs, on many street corners. And the bags too, by the way, the women's bags.
Yeah, the bags are supposed to be amazing knockoffs at this point.
Which is makes me wonder why pay for the full price when if you are really rich, by the way, and you have a knockoff bag, why would you pay full price for the bag? Because everyone's going to assume you're riding having a real bag at that point.
Yeah, I guess it's one of those status things that you know.
Yeah, true. It's like having the painting in your house, right?
Hmm.
Even if hardly anyone ever sees it. What did you think about Elena and how she deals with the sexual assault or the attempted sexual assault at the club. Do you think she had that under control, by the way?
I do not.
She seems
I
to be
think,
very confident about it.
yeah, and I don't doubt that she's gotten herself into some less than ideal situations and she's a survivor and she managed her way out of them. This particular situation, I did not have a good feeling about it for her. But we only met her character really an episode ago. So so maybe there's more that will be the subject of some exposition. But based on what was happening and the particular setting of being kind of, there weren't a ton of people around, I didn't have a good feeling about it for her. What did you think?
Yeah, I thought she was in trouble, to be honest. And this guy's much bigger. I think and very intentionally you're
Exactly.
casting
Huge
somebody.
compared to her.
He's much bigger than John Hamm, much bigger than her, obviously. A foot, at least a foot taller than she is, and outweighs her by 200 pounds, perhaps. So I don't think that is I don't think she was in a really good position there. I mean, I guess she could have flirted, and she makes a very valid point that she could tell him to, go screw himself after they have the money in their pocket. But that wouldn't be that night, and he might have had some expectations. So I'm
Right.
not
I
sure if
agree.
she was as confident as she thought it was. I did like the fact that she arbitrarily, pepper sprayed both of them,
Yes.
which was very funny. But she does lead Coop out of there at least. So a few other things that happen here. Most importantly, probably, is that Coop's son is now a popular kid in school and has a girlfriend, or at least someone who is interested in him. And he's, coming out of his shell a little bit. You see that in multiple ways. You see his sister appreciating the music he's making. So he apparently has been very internal and little by little is coming out of his shell. But this leads to trouble too, because they're taking his Adderall. Why is he on Adderall, by the way? He doesn't seem to have. Maybe he does, but who knows? But they're taking
I
his
don't think
Adderall.
we've seen enough
Yeah,
to know.
he doesn't seem to have that. I mean, he seems to be. I guess no. I guess I take that back because they do mention here that the mom has been there multiple times that year since the divorce. So he's been having some trouble at school. So maybe he has been on Adderall before then, maybe because of the divorce or partially because of the divorce. But anyway, this gets him into a lot of trouble. The kids are snorting his Adderall, and they want to kick him out of school. And of course, Mel
I mean,
suggests,
they
"Hey,
did
why
kick
not
him
kick?"
out of
They
school.
did kick him
Yeah.
out, correct? Yeah. I mean, it's just temporary, right? But they could have expelled him. But Mel says, "Hey, how about $250,000? That'll do it." More and more money that this guy's bleeding.
Yeah. I think she is not a good negotiator.
No, as he makes very clear. Yeah. He goes, why'd you start with 20 or 30,000? Just go straight for
Yeah.
the $250,000. But of course, he can't afford any of this. And he still can't admit that this is happening. Yeah, I mean, I sympathize with the son here. But at the same time, I feel like maybe this is a form of self destruction. Like if the kid is going to get himself kicked out of school, then don't spend $250,000 trying to keep him in it if it's going to happen inevitably anyway. But maybe it won't. Maybe he will try to turn it around here. We'll see. I mean, maybe he wants to stick around just to keep trying to date that girl, if nothing else. One thing I really liked here was there are a lot of mirroring in this particular episode, a lot of dynamics that they're showing overlapping between different characters. And one of the things I really liked was seeing his sister come in, Tori, right? Her name is, and have that nice moment with him after she knows he's kind of had a rough patch. And I've mentioned before that I wonder if we're seeing the dynamic between Allie and Coop replayed among these siblings. And I really feel like they draw that line directly because we cut directly from that scene to Allie with Andrew, with Coop at his house. So it's almost like they're making that reference point back. So then it's almost, you can imagine that maybe Coop was a little bit of like a socially awkward kid at some point who played the drums like his son does. And then maybe Allie was the more outgoing one, or vice versa. Maybe they played these roles for each other in the past. But I thought all of this was really interesting. It was a way to, in a way, develop their earlier relationship through the siblings, the younger children.
It's an interesting point. I think they've definitely drawn similarities between Hunter. Is that the son?
I think so. Yeah.
between Hunter and Allie
Yeah.
in
Hunter.
that they are both musically inclined,
Mhm.
and Hunter reaches out to Allie when he's at that party and needs someone who will come and understand, and she gets in the tub with him. I feel like they've established a connection there. So
So
to
maybe this is
me,
a
I'm
role
seeing
she's
the
played
parallel
before.
kind of in reverse. Yeah.
Yeah. I love all the scenes between Allie and her brother. I like the fact that she mocks him after Sam has sex with him, and she
Yes. Oh my gosh.
what
So
an
awkward.
uncomfortable conversation to have with your
Oh,
with your sister. But they're very funny, and of course Sam. We'll talk about Sam a little bit later, but it is interesting to see that Allie has her issues, and that she seems to be kind of an emotional anchor here. However, in this particular episode, she might be going back to bad habits. She goes to what's his name? Who's Mel's boyfriend now?
Nick.
Nick.
Is it not Nick?
I think it is.
When will we learn to just have the cast list in front of us?
I know. I actually do have it here somewhere, but it's just like it's too much to search through. But yeah, she does go to Nick's gym and runs into her old fiance, who, of course, we know that not only is she just talking last week about still pining for him, or at least the life that she could have had with him, but of course, she has popped up on his lawn multiple times, arbitrarily strumming the guitar. So this is not a good habit she's falling into. She's like, I'm not stalking you, but she definitely was stalking him. What do you think they're setting up here for her in this particular moment? I mean, I really do hope that she can get past all of this and this doesn't have some kind of relapse, but
I think they're setting up a relapse.
exactly.
I mean, we've been talking so far, we're halfway through the season, about how well adjusted she seems for somebody that the context is she's had serious mental health issues. So it feels like we are going to see the return of that. Otherwise, this all seems very strange.
Yeah, in that first meeting they have between them, we see that Sam is breaking up with with Nick. Sorry. Sam is breaking up with Coop, and she's about to go on a trip out of town, which is going to set up something obviously later in the particular episode. But what did you think about that conversation they have after they have sex? Because she is getting dressed and leaving. What was that shot of her shoes? I couldn't figure out that shot. They actually show her putting her shoes on. Are these like really expensive shoes? Is that what they were trying to show? I'm not sure what I was supposed to be seeing there.
Yeah, I noticed the shot as well. I'm not sure if it was supposed to be conveying something. If it did, it went over my head.
Same here. I actually rewound it just a few seconds to be like, was there something under the bed I was supposed to be seeing or whatever? I think we're just watching her put these shoes on. I'm like, maybe these are very expensive shoes because the show does, luxuriate on some of these luxuries, right, multiple times.
Yeah, I watched this on a smaller screen because, as you may know, the Knicks were clinching the playoffs last night.
Yes, of course.
So that was on my big screen. So I feel like I might have missed some of the finer details.
But the conversation itself, very interesting that she says, I really like you, too much, maybe. And, but I especially like, we've also heard last week that Tori complained that he didn't fight for the marriage. And I found it very interesting that as Sam is like saying, well, I think it's time for us. Look, I'm giving you the, a get out of jail free card. You should take it. And he says, I guess I guess I don't have any say in the matter. And she says, wrong answer again.
Yeah.
She was setting it up for him to fight for her, and he did not again.
Yeah. If we didn't get it last week, they hit us over the head with it this week, that he has just been kind of accepting things rather than fighting for them and then adjusting accordingly. Right. So, yeah, this is a flaw of his, to not understand that he can change the course of events by just saying what it is that he wants.
And what does he want, though? Isn't that the problem? He doesn't know what he wants.
I think maybe he's been so focused on what he's supposed to want and
Yes.
ticking off those accomplishments that he
Right.
hasn't paid enough attention to what he wants.
Well, I mean, I think that's the theme of the show. I completely agree that that is probably what we're seeing here, right? That he has, I'm going to go to Princeton, I'm going to play tennis, and I'm going to be good at it, and I'm going to get a scholarship, and I'm going to be good at math, and I'm going to get this hedge fund job, and then I'm going to climb the corporate ladder. And he's just doing everything right. And he's doing it because it's not his passion, it's because it is what he's supposed to do. And he's getting everything he supposedly that everybody wants to have and what he's supposed to have as well. And it just keeps working until it doesn't, right? And then he loses everything that he supposedly cared about. And yeah, he doesn't fight for any of it because he doesn't know, right? He's just on the treadmill and he still doesn't know. And but maybe he's discovering that he really does like to steal stuff.
I mean, I think as far as what he really wants, I think you see that he really is sad to have lost
Yes.
his marriage.
Right.
That seems like a very real thing, a real emotion that's reflected. This Mel thing seems a little bit more touch and go. I think he's not really sure whether he wants her around or not.
Mel or Sam?
Oh, sorry, Sam. I meant Sam. Sorry.
That might have been a Freudian slip there because I think he does want Mel back, but or he thinks he wants Mel back. That's the other thing. Maybe I think he wants, and I think Mel is actually in the exact same circumstance. She talks about how angry she is all the time, and I think there's another mirroring there. I think he and her are going through the same thing, and they're transgressing in their own ways. Whether she's just keying a car or unable to respond appropriately during the party, those are her transgressions. Whereas he's stealing from people who annoy him. He's like, getting these little petty revenges on these folks.
Yeah.
But I think they are both pining for the joy they had in building this life and are unable to accept the fact that A, maybe they're supposed to have something different and they can't make that work, or B, they want back what they had before. But that doesn't necessarily fix the problem either, right? Because what it is now is not what it was in the past, right? So, and I don't know if the show has an opinion on how to solve that, but they are they're all in this crisis, right?
Yes, I agree. And I think it's, I was thinking about it after last episode, after our conversation. I think it's something beyond a typical midlife crisis, what they're going through. I mean, I think it is a midlife crisis, but I think there's more to it. I think there's a deeper dissatisfaction that they're dealing with.
I mean, it's so much of this feels like, if they just talk things out, this all could be fixed, which is so hilarious. But I guess
maybe they just need to go on vacation more. Have they thought of that?
I mean, that literally is, I'm thinking about, like, the reality is that, to Elena's point earlier, they still have massive wealth. So you could imagine that if he just said, look, this is what's happening. Look, let's try to fix this marriage. Let's just give it another trial run, right? And like, we're going to sell everything. We're going to sell everything we have. And then we're going to, scale back, and we're going to rebuild, and we're not going to have all these amenities, but, I'll spend more quality time with the kids, which is what they really want. And we're going to spend less on some of these extravagances and live in a slightly smaller house and maybe get out of this particular microscope of wealth that we're under right now, that we've put ourselves into, this particular trap they've trapped themselves in, and just like, let's take a breather and rebuild, right? And maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. And if they had that conversation, all of these problems would go away. But they're not going to have that conversation because they're all running away from their own demons, right?
They could be one of those couples or families that you see on travel real estate shows. I don't know if you ever watch those, that it's like, they're moving here from the hustle and bustle of New York to open a bed and breakfast in the rainforest in Costa Rica. They could do that.
Yeah, or these people who are just like, we're going to go on a yacht around the world and we sell everything. And then they're going to be like, and we're homeschooling the kids for the next year, And then they get lost at sea. That's the downside of those.
Yes.
These people are lost at sea in a completely different way. See what I did there?
I do. Very nice.
Speaking of someone who's over their head in water or underwater, let's say, uh, we have Bernie, Barney, I believe.
Barney. Barney.
I keep forgetting if it's Barney or Bernie. Barney. And we see a little more insight here. I have to say, whether the show is doing this on purpose or not, and I felt it again when Mel just throws, hey, give him $250,000. I don't know if the show's misogynistic or if it's trying to say something or if it's what exactly it is. But my personal opinion is I keep getting angry at these female characters on the show who are just spending money like left and right? Like just like, we'll just solve the problem by spending money on it. So and once again, I don't know if the show is trying to say something there or if it's just accidental misogyny. But
Yeah.
in this particular case, I want you to answer that. But I did feel in this particular case that they did add a little complexity to Barney's wife's situation, which I thought was really fascinating. This idea of these expectations, these cultural and familial expectations, and how she is trapped in some ways by this as well. But what do you think about either of those points?
I think it's an interesting point that you're making about the male versus female characters.
Yeah.
And I wonder, on the one hand, I think it would have been nice to have this balanced out by having a couple where the woman is the breadwinner.
Yeah, the Barney character could have been a woman and had a stay-at-home husband who, whatever, like is a semi-pro golfer who has never made more than $50,000 in a year, something like that.
So I think it could have been fixed in the writing and the storytelling. On the other hand, not living in one of these suburbs of New York City, I don't know how accurate this is or isn't. And this was always one of my feelings when people would complain about the lack of diversity in Friends, for example. You know, I live here. I go out to restaurants. I go out to coffee shops. I happen to have a fairly diverse friend group, although I am the diversity in some people's friend groups. And I can say, when I go to a restaurant, it is not unusual to see a table of 6 white people sitting together. Right. I mean, sometimes people's friends are not diverse.
Or six minority groups, by the way, my minority folks, right? Like,
as much as in an ideal world, the cast of Friends would have been more diverse, was it unrealistic that 6 white people are friends? Absolutely not. Right. So, I guess I'm struggling a little bit with the tension of that.
But what do you think about the fact that, universally, it seems that these women seem to be putting this, cultural expectation, these financial expectation on these men, but to complicate that a little bit, these men maybe are the type of men who have advertised that is the lifestyle they're going to provide. So, in other words, you live by the sword, you die by the sword, right? Like you can't say that this is what I'm going to provide for you, and then have, basically tell these women that that's what you're buying into here, and then complaining when they want you to follow through on that expectation. But I do think that particularly here, where Barney's wife was a little bit one-dimensional earlier, just the, kind of the way we saw some of the female characters in the pilot episode, as far as Coop's perspective, where it's just yet another onus that's being put on him. In this regard, I found it very interesting that you have that he's not this breadwinner who's expected to support her entire family. He's actually an underperformer, and that he could have a better job if he just worked for her dad. And her dad is kind of a jerk, or explicitly a jerk, and they are just willing to just throw money at him and say, don't worry about it. Like it's such a salt in the wound that he is really struggling financially in this circumstance. And for them, it's just like, don't worry about it. I just have this little, tiny little pocket of cash here on the side with just a couple of $1 million in it for emergencies like this. And, it's such an embarrassing moment for him to be in. And of course, you probably, for me anyway, think about some of these ethnic marriages and sometimes, relationships I've seen where it is a bit of a cultural or ethnic mismatch, and how that relationship has this added tension of having to work because people thought it wasn't going to work, right? And now that becomes an interesting aspect of it. And then you would think, well,
Wow.
then why is she putting all this additional stress potentially on this? But of course, you think about now this family, the family showing up, and so now she wants to make an even bigger show of it. And of course, all of this blows up in her face. The house is under repairs. They're like, if he was a real man, he would have rented a house for you guys to live in. So even this extravagant spending he's doing he undercuts himself no matter what he does, basically.
Well, we don't know Barney's background, but to add some dimension to your original idea of the women and the men and their dynamic, it seems here quite likely he's married up.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So there is that struggle to prove that you are worthy of the daughter.
And he doesn't speak Korean.
Right. He doesn't speak Korean. So that's already a big black mark. So he has married up, and that is its own issue. I do think, to something you mentioned, couples can often have a dynamic of like, it's me and you against the world. And
Right.
that can be productive and it can be destructive, depending on the dysfunction in that particular relationship.
Right.
And then final thought, which is just related, you're saying universally this is the situation with the men and women, but if you look at Nick and Mel is saying, stop spending money on me. This is too much.
Yeah.
So it's not universal.
Yeah, and that's an interesting comment. That's an interesting point you make there too, because it does seem like Nick is probably the more financially more financially well off than Mel is, not only in the divorce and, like, let's say they take 50-50, but even if you're a very successful hedge fund manager and given the house they live in and everything else, they don't seem to be the richest person in the neighborhood. But if you are a professional athlete that has some kind of reputation, that probably has sponsorship deals, that owns a chain of gyms and all this other stuff, your cash flow is probably millions of dollars a year just from sponsorships, let's say, theoretically, which I don't think most hedge fund managers are. Of course, the elite ones are making more than that, but most hedge fund managers do not have a multi-million-dollar salary per year, especially when you have your investment fund, which you can't touch, which of course would be the big cash cow for you in that particular case. But it is an interesting point that maybe he is, extra salt to the wound for Coop, that Mel is currently, basically this person who has more money than you do, and you are financially struggling, is living in your house and has like a bigger house down the street that they don't even live in. It's so much worse, right? And Mel's like, you need to give me $250,000. It's like, go ask your boyfriend for the $250,000. And she's like, no, I don't want him to think we're too serious. So all of this is like obviously a disaster for him.
Yeah, Barney's family could probably move into a wing of Nick's house and nobody would ever notice.
Exactly. Like, yeah, there's absolutely no reason that he couldn't, have that situation. But Mel is also and this is why she probably hates herself to some extent. She's in the circumstance where she will not commit to Nick. Committing to Nick would let Coop off the hook. He'd be good, right? But she won't, right? And then so Nick, this is just another way that Coop is getting hurt by the situation twice. Not only did he lose his marriage, he's still supporting the people who cuckolded him. So and by the way, worse than that, if you were supporting him and they had set up this Nick character as like a has-been that really never really made it, and now he's hanging around, just someone who buddied up to him and now took his wife at the same time, that would be one version of the story. But that's not it. Nick is successful, so there's no reason that he needs to be subsidizing his lifestyle.
Yeah, he's about to be a toilet industry billionaire.
Exactly. It could be a whole new industry he's launching here. He could also go bankrupt with that bad toilet. that could be the other shoe to drop, that he makes a huge investment in $30,000 toilets and they don't sell. But you figure the gym still going to make him money too. The gym does seem to be a popular thing.
Yeah, for sure.
What did you think about this episode? Speaking of Nick, starting it off where Nick is doing that demo, other than the comedy of it, that he's like going on TV to promote his luxury bath toilets, which, by the way, is a thing. Although I don't think they cost $30,000, but if you go to Japan, there's a whole culture of luxury toilets. Nothing as extravagant as this. The Bluetooth built into the toilet, sure, why not? But what did you think about this setup? Not only that you see his performance, right? There's so much of this is about the performance of success. And this explicitly is that, right? Where Nick goes on stage and he's like got his $1 million smile and then he walks backstage and Mel is there. And like he immediately goes back to, the antagonism that he feels from her, or at least the hurt he has from being the way that the party went last week. Although, hey, they seem to work things out in the green room.
Yeah, I think, first of all, I think that whole toilet scene went on too long, just from a story construction perspective. I got the idea. But I did like how they addressed the conflict between them. She gave an honest apology, but I think the real takeaway here is that he is just so much more into her than she is into him.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And that is why he is able to forgive her so easily for this train wreck of a party and the surrounding stuff. And I mean, they do say, in fairness, she did say not to do this, and he did it anyway.
Right.
But
yeah, I mean, he really, that's how I read all of that. I don't have such a negative opinion of Mel after last week versus some of the reaction on the internet for her in that very fact that, he knows that she has these qualms and he is trying to push he's trying to corner her into making a commitment to him, basically. And if you don't want to make a commitment, being pressured is not the best way to motivate somebody. So in some ways, he's being not even passive aggressive; he's being aggressive, and it is it didn't work out in that regard. But I do like that he obviously really does care about her, and I do like what he says, saying that I understand that this relationship didn't start the right way, but that doesn't mean it can't be good, even if it started the wrong way, which I did think was nice. There's also an interesting, once again, all this mirroring of, seeing Allie and her brother, and then the younger Cooper family and their dynamic, and how there's these mirroring. We have explicitly here that there's these two sex scenes with this between two people where one person's definitely more into the person than the other person is, and the two different ways of one is a reconciliation, the other one's like a breakup. So it is an interesting mirroring of dynamics there.
But I feel like whenever they show Sam and Coop having sex, it always looks vaguely uncomfortable for Coop.
Yes, she seems to know that he is just going with the flow here, right? He's just not really into it. And all of this seems to be like he's trying to be into it. And by the way, again, this is what Mel is doing as well, right? So there's definitely an overlap there in the dynamic where he seems to just, even when he says to her, hey, when I come back and when you come back, let's go to the city, just the two of us. And it's like he's saying the right things, like, yeah, let's give this a shot. But he doesn't seem to be really into it. He just seems to be like, I should say something now, and that unfortunately seems to be a pattern for him. So, of course, Sam is away. What do you think about seeing Sam visit with her family out in, where are they? Chicago?
Boston, I think she
Boston,
said.
Right, Boston, correct.
I thought it was really sweet, her little interaction with her mom.
Yeah, I think Olivia Munn's giving a really good performance in this show.
Yeah, I think, well, this is before we saw the final scene.
Right.
So my take on it in the moment of watching it was that, she sees her mom, she feels the safety of being home, and just, all the stress that has been piling up on her shoulders can finally release. And I can't remember exactly what her mom says, but it was something very sweet, like this will always be your home or something like that.
Yeah, you can always come here. And yeah, I thought that was very sweet. And we just see the emotional, the complexity of what she's been probably going through recently in her interactions with her mom. Yeah, I really like that too. And of course, but that is all set up because at first we see Coop is texting her. And for a minute, I guess I fell for it and thinking that, oh, he wants to connect with her because he feels like kind of unmoored after the art crime goes badly. But no, he's ready to steal again. And he is breaking into her house and confirming the fact that she's indeed out of town. And of course, then we circle all the way back to the very first scene of this whole entire series, where he walks in, slips in that pool of blood, knocks himself out. And interesting here that we didn't have any context for that at the beginning of the show. That I thought that maybe this person had fallen down the stairs. I did correctly identify who it was. The heavy, because of the Paul's heavier set person on the show, one of the characters that seems to be like a good candidate given the physique of this particular person. Also, I was pretty sure that we'd been in and out of that house so many times that I was thinking to myself, I'm pretty sure that's the house that from the very first episode. And then I started being pretty confident that, but I was thinking, did Paul commit suicide and then he just happened to be there? Did they get into a fight? Did he find Paul in the house and he was jealous and tried to kill Coop and blah, blah, blah. Actually, no, he comes upon the scene, slips in this pool of blood, and then we see him trying to make his escape. A few things here. Paul is tied up, right? Like,
oh, I missed that. Maybe because I was on a smaller screen.
So Paul at the bottom of the stairs looks like he has been restrained in some ways. So that's an interesting twist because who would have tried to kill him? Anyway, so I'm very curious to know who that is. Maybe it's the new girlfriend or a jealous boyfriend or someone's trying to steal something from him. Anyway, not sure what the details of that are. Interesting.
Wait, so have you ruled out that it could be Sam?
I did rule out it could be Sam just because, I think if the murder scene was more kempt or less overt, that it could have been, like if he had found him in a bedroom or something. But I don't imagine that Sam would leave with her son with the husband's, head bashed open at the bottom of the stairs and just walk
Maybe
out
she
of the
picked her
house.
kids up from school and went straight from there.
She didn't even do it. I mean, anybody looking through, I don't know who's going to swing by, but if Coop swings by or whoever, this seems to be, or I don't know if she has a cleaning service, but it seems like leaving things like this, not a dead body in the house. I'm talking explicitly like this. Like, if you just shot somebody at the top of the stairs and left them like bleeding out at the bottom of the stairs, it doesn't seem like the first thing you do is just grab your bag and walk out the door. Like I think that there would be some damage control before you walk out the door. Yeah. And she also seemed a little too, when she talks to her mom, she does get emotional, but it doesn't seem like someone who's just murdered her ex-husband. So do you think it's her? Do you think that's a possibility?
I haven't ruled out that it's her.
That would be, I was going to ask you, what do you think is going to happen next? It would make sense in some ways if she was the person who killed Paul, because she could like call Coop to help her cover it up and say, you don't understand what happened, blah, blah, blah. And then Coop's like, oh, good. Like I'm off the hook because I'm covering up the murder with her. That would be a little more convenient than whatever's going to happen now.
It's covering up the murder. That's funny.
Yeah, exactly. Covering up her murder with, his break-in with her murder.
Okay. So again, small screen problems. What did her text to him say?
Oh, she says, I'm up in Boston. You know that, or something like that. I already told you, something like that. So it wasn't any, yeah. He's just like, you up? And she was like, I'm up in Boston. I told you that. That's why at first I was like, I actually fell for it, being like, oh, maybe he just wants to be with her. And he's such an idiot. He forgot that she left town, like proving her point that he's not paying attention. And I'm like, no, he wants to make sure she's not in the house so he could break in. So, but like if she did, but also that seems very convenient. Like the whole, like her reaction of being like, it just doesn't seem like someone who is like, oh my God, don't go in the house. You're going to see something I don't want anyone to see. It just doesn't seem likely, but it is. I did think that's definitely played in my head that she killed him and then she ran off to Boston, but the plans for Boston were already there. And then that for her to leave it like that seems crazy. Like, that she wouldn't do the bare minimum to cover up the death. Yeah, it seems a little odd to say the least. But like I said, it could tie up loose ends. It would be a good, it could be an elegant way to, from plot perspective. And yeah, so a couple of things. One thing I forgot to bring up, and then one is speculating on what's going to happen next. So one, of course, is also at the end of this episode, we see Barney stewing about the money that was offered to him. I mean, not for nothing, man. I got to say, these people have got to get out of their own ways. I understand where he's coming from. I understand there's probably a lot of history there. I understand that he wants to not take the money, but man, take the money. Just take the money.
Swallow your pride. You just found out you need to dig around that giant rock in your backyard.
It's going to cost another $200,000. Take the money. I mean, I don't understand. I mean, I understand his ego. I understand the pride thing. I do, but take the money. But of course, he is pouring that, it's very expensive whiskey all over the place. And then sets the check on fire. And I honestly thought when he was doing that, I'm like, he is intentionally going to burn the house down.
I thought so too. I thought, wow, he just snapped.
Exactly.
And now he's going to try and make an insurance claim.
But maybe that was his intention. And then once he saw that actually happening, like actually the fire getting totally, he was like, oh my God, wait a second, what am I doing? And luckily, this is probably only like hundreds. I mean, like it's like a stack of wood and then some of the beams, which is probably just hundreds of dollars of damage, as opposed to burning everything down with his family inside the house, which would be much worse.
Yeah.
But what do you think about, I mean, that moment and what it says there about where he's really at the end of his rope as well?
I think we're seeing kind of character by character that everyone's got this anger inside of them and they don't know what to do with it. And it's coming out in unhealthy ways. Maybe not Barney's wife. She seems good.
She seems to be, you know what, though? She was very uncomfortable during that dinner. So I do wonder, once again, this idea of performance, I do wonder if there is some element of her awareness that it's not just that she wants to spend her husband's money or wants to live at this level. It's that she wants to prove to her parents that she made this correct choice. So I think even what we're seeing from her is a performance to some extent. And I think that we see that over and over again with all these characters.
That's fair.
What do you think about Coop? A few things there at the very end. He's underwater. He says, if I'd known what was gonna, he thinks about for a moment of just letting himself drown. What does that say about his character? But then what do you think it teases for the future where he says, if I knew what was to come, maybe I should have drowned myself. And more importantly, of course, plot wise, how does he get out of this circumstance, do you think?
Yeah, I'm fascinated by that comment. Yeah. And I'm so interested to know what's going to happen. I think, when we talked about the first episode, I had said, there's no way he's cleaning this blood up. Why is he even trying? But actually, seeing his plan, I'm a little impressed. Nobody's around. He's going to use the washing machine.
Yeah.
Clean all the blood out of everything. I mean, maybe he can do it.
Yeah. Do you think he calls anybody? Do you think he calls anybody to help him out?
No, I think he's going to just try and act like he was never there.
Yeah, I think that's what he's got to do. And then, and honestly, that is the best option for him. Although he may be giving himself away. If, let's say, she comes home, she finds the body, she calls the cops, they're going to say, like, somebody else was here. Like, there's bleach, there's, stuff, so there might be some, arrows pointing back to him. And of course, he was having an affair with her as well. If that comes to light, there's going to be some questions as well. But as long as he covers his tracks, there's going to be a lot of other evidence leading to whoever did kill him, because there's someone else who killed him. He is actually innocent of this.
We know for a fact he did not do it. Yeah.
He may confound the making that case by whatever he does as part of his own cover up, but interesting to see. I'm really curious. And for anybody who's been, I actually been really enjoying the show, even though it's gotten a little messy in the last couple episodes. but from the early critical reactions, everybody's like, it's a slow burn until the plot goes
Really?
pedal to the metal. And I think we're in the pedal to the metal part of the plot now because of
Nice.
this death is going to obviously change the direction of this show for sure. So I'm really curious to see. We're halfway through. We got another half season. And also that apparently, like I mentioned, they're shooting season 2, and the showrunner has said a much darker season 2. So we may be going into this might be the lighter Breaking Bad first half season, let's say, for example, and then we're going into deeper, darker areas of Coop's psyche as he gets into this criminal underworld. But I'd like to see more of that satire, I got to say. So maybe let's not let it get too dark too quick.
Yeah, this show has been very funny at times, so I don't want to lose that.
Yeah, agreed. All right. Anything else? Sona, have you watched any of You? Did you watch any of that?
I'm in this dilemma where I'm saving it because I've had a very stressful few weeks. There's just been a lot going on. Nothing terrible, just, work and life. And I feel like, oh, I just want to binge the whole thing in bed with like under the covers with a great snack. And so I've been saving it. But meanwhile, time is passing and I'm not watching it. And
Yes.
so now I'm so torn about what to do, whether to break it up into pieces or wait until that day finally presents itself, which to be honest could be months.
Right.
So
That's why I was curious, because for me personally, if I don't jump on something right away, and I like save it for later, it's like a year goes by and like never watched it. Never watched it.
I agree with you, but I love this show so
Yeah.
much that it's really on my priority list. And it's my love for it is working against me because I'm not allowing myself to watch it.
The do you know what happens to him at the end? Have you had that
I
spoiled for you?
don't.
Okay, I'm
I
not going to
have
say anything.
been fairly spoiler free
Yeah.
on this.
I've had it spoiled in my Google headlines. That's why I didn't know if you had
Oh,
it
no, I'm happy I
accidentally.
didn't.
Yeah, that's why I was just wondering if he had accidentally had it spoiled. I will not spoil it for anybody, obviously. I don't even watch the show, so I'm not going to spoil a show I don't watch. That's for damn sure. I might spoil a show that I am watching because I want to talk to someone about it. I'm not going to spoil a show I don't even watch. But speaking of sociopaths and popular television shows,
Sure.
so we have a official return date for Dexter Resurrection. It's
I
mid-June.
saw
Yeah.
that.
There's absolutely nothing. I just did a May preview episode on the podcast feed here, and May is packed with stuff. June has nothing, so we may have to. We may have to do the Dexter Resurrection show, which you're probably going to watch anyway. So we might have to watch that.
We saw the little commercial and my husband's eyes lit up. So I'm pretty sure we're going to be watching it.
There you go. There you go. And I might, as part of that, I might actually force myself to watch the rest of the what was it called? Not first. Was it First Blood? What was it called? The
Original Sin.
Original Sin for First Blood. The New Blood, Original Sin. I don't know. Whatever. So I might force myself to watch the rest of that season, which I didn't hate. I just wasn't engaged enough to keep going through.
I get that. I think,
and they're bringing it back for another season, by the way. So maybe another reason.
Oh, is that right?
They're going to actually bring it back for season 2. I guess it was popular enough that they'll bring it back.
I hadn't heard that. But speaking of sociopaths and speaking of charisma, generally, when we talk about John Hamm, we're always talking about charisma, right?
Mm-hmm.
Michael C. Hall has that, I think, that, you just enjoy watching him, especially in this character. So I think that carries a lot, although there really is no excuse for that whole Alaska situation that we watched.
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's a whole other, that's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. That episode, that season was, which is in the feed, by the way, if anybody wants to go, but that didn't really work for me. Yeah.
I don't even know what that one was called. What was that one called?
That was New Blood, right? New Blood?
New Blood. Okay.
Yeah. And that was supposed to get a sequel too. And I mean, that didn't happen, obviously, but now they're doing this resurrection thing instead. I think the funniest thing, by the way, I don't know if you remember this, but for me was the revelation very late in us watching that show, where we got very close to the end of that season. And I realized it was Christmas Day. And because he was, he at the beginning of that season of show, Dexter has that calendar where he's just like, where he crosses out, going like another day without murdering
Uh-huh.
anybody. Like
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
it's like the factory where 400 days since our last
Yep.
accident, and it's like 400 days since I murdered anyone. So I remember that the calendar existed. So I actually went back, and it was like December 14th, and I'm like, so in 11 days, like 25 people are murdered. They all kind of seem to be murdered by him, and somehow no one ever questions him about it. His long lost son shows up. The son, gets in trouble at school, has a drug overdose, intervenes in a terrorist attack at the school. And I'm like, this all happened in 2 weeks? Like, holy cow. Like, this is a really eventful 2 weeks at this town. Anyway, that was a very funny season of show. And I don't know if they thought about the calendar when they were like day one. Like, this is like 10 episodes in 10 days. They're like, wow, those are quite 10 days on that show. And so anyway, we will probably be at least watching some of Dexter Resurrection, which is coming back. And did you get a chance to watch the trailer I sent you for Nine Perfect Strangers?
Oh my goodness, I've been so busy with work. I haven't, but I will definitely take a look. I have hesitations about this.
Oh, so many. But maybe it does go week to week. So it's probably something that we will sample here. And we do have a relationship with the show because we covered it here on the podcast. Not a great season of TV, I have to say. But I was curious to get your take on it because you had mentioned, well, maybe the next White Lotus will be in some kind of mountain location. And I'm like, here they are in the Swiss Alps.
Mm-hmm.
For Nine Perfect Strangers. So maybe it is the part of that White Lotus situation you imagined. What's funny about it is I read the book Nine Perfect Strangers, and I never published an episode where I was going to record, compare and contrast the book to the show because they're so different. But what's funny about the trailer is that it is very much making a formula out of the first season of the show where you have these different people and they're actually interconnected with each other, but they don't know how. And then they get them all high and they start having these hallucinations and they put them in these weird experiences, which is pretty different from what happens in the book. But it is very much like a formula for the first season of the show, which all of this makes me laugh because I'm like, do you think there's like a lot of people out there who are like, I can't wait to see that formula play out again? But apparently they thought there was an audience for this. And people, for whatever reasons, they love watching these Nicole Kidman series. So maybe it'll be another hit. Who knows? And that's just one of the things that's coming out this May. Do check out the May preview episode with a whole bunch of other things that are coming out. Some of them look pretty good. Have you checked? Did you try to sample the 4 seasons at all?
Oh my gosh, is it already out?
It's already out. Came out yesterday.
I didn't know. Okay, add it to my list. I definitely am going to watch that.
This should be a pretty easy watch. I haven't watched any of it yet. The reviews are mixed but positive, and it has 8 episodes, but they're all under half an hour long. So it's like a long movie, basically. So so I might sample some of that too before.
This is like right up my alley, the exact type of thing that I love.
Yeah, I think you would really like this. The basic premise. I never watched the original Alan Alda movie. Did you watch it?
No, I didn't. Actually, now that you mention it, I remember the movie, but no, I haven't thought about that movie in 30 plus years.
Yeah, exactly. I only know that movie because I remember when I was very, very young, like a child, seeing like commercials for it on TV. But I've never seen it. I've never watched it. And apparently it's already been adapted by Alan Alda himself in the mid 80s as a TV series, like as a mini series, I should say. So I guess it's kind of this has been done before, but it does seem like an interesting framing device where you have 3 couples that always hang out together. One of them is their marriage is falling apart, and then how that impacts the other friends in this group of friends. And it takes place 4 different trips where these people always travel together, apparently. So it's 4 different trips. One of them is like a wedding, but one of them is like an actual getaway. One of them, I think, is they're all getting together for the holidays. But in these 4 different seasons, they have you kind of check in with them over the course of this year. And, the impact of this one relationship falling apart, kind of creating these ripple effects among the other relationships. So it sounds great, but the reviews have been just mixed. So, but I think I may sample it. And I mean, Tina Fey and a lot of the writers here are the writers from 30 Rock, and 30 Rock's just so hilarious. So I have to assume that even if it doesn't all coalesce, it's probably
Right.
going to have a lot of good comedy. So I'll probably watch some of that. All right, Sona, thank you again. We will meet again next week and see how Coop gets out of this crazy situation he's in.
I'm looking forward to it.
Same here. All right, thanks again.
Take care.
All right, bye.